They said, don't go in there. They said those men will eat you alive. You know what I said? Good. At least somebody's hungry. Cole Hunter saw his niece eating trash out of a dumpster in the freezing Detroit rain, and something inside him didn't just break. It detonated. This is not a story about a biker. This is not a story about a bar. This is a story about what happens when the world throws away a child and the people nobody trusts decide they're the only ones willing to pick her up. Subscribe to this channel right now. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels, and don't you dare leave before the end. Because nothing about this night is what you think it is. The rain didn't fall in Detroit that night. It attacked. It came sideways, hard and mean. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill your skin, it gets into your teeth, into the back of your throat, into the part of your chest where fear lives. The streets in the industrial quarter were empty the way only truly dangerous places are empty, not quiet, but abandoned. Like even the city itself had decided that whatever happened down here tonight, it didn't want to be a witness. Cole Hunter had been riding for 11 years. He'd ridden through blizzards in Montana, through summer heat in New Mexico that turned the asphalt into something that breathed. He had ridden through nights that should have killed him and mornings he didn't deserve to see. He wasn't afraid of weather. He wasn't afraid of dark roads. But tonight, something was riding behind him that he couldn't shake. 3 weeks, 21 days, 504 hours since his sister Sarah had stopped answering her phone. He'd called. He'd driven to her apartment. He'd knocked until his knuckles bled. He'd stood on the sidewalk outside her building at 2 a.m, talking to a super who hadn't seen her in weeks, and a neighbor who said she'd heard screaming one night and hadn't wanted to get involved. He'd filed a report with a cop who looked at him, looked at the tattoos, the leather, the club patch on his chest, and written something down on a notepad with the expression of a man who had already decided this story didn't matter. Cole had gone back to the clubhouse that night and sat alone at the bar for 4 hours without drinking anything. Just sitting, just thinking, running through every person his sister knew, every debt she might have had, every man she might have trusted that she shouldn't have. Sarah wasn't reckless. That was the thing people didn't understand about her. She was careful. She was the one in the family who balanced her checkbook, who kept her doors locked, who called Cole every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock without fail. Rain or shine, whether he was hungover or fresh, whether they'd fought the week before or not. Every Sunday, 9 o'clock, 3 Sundays of silence. That silence was louder than anything Cole had ever heard in his life. So tonight, he was riding. Not toward anything specific, not with a plan. He was riding the way a man rides when sitting still feels like drowning, just to keep moving, just to feel like he was doing something, even if he didn't know what that something was yet. He'd covered the east side twice. He'd swung through the Corktown neighborhood where Sarah used to waitress. He'd circled back past her apartment building one more time just to stand on the sidewalk and stare up at her dark windows like they might decide to tell him something. They didn't. So he pushed further south, deeper into the industrial zone, into the part of Detroit that the city's comeback story had not reached and probably never would. Abandoned factories that looked like broken teeth, chain-link fences with signs nobody read anymore, loading docks that hadn't seen a truck in a decade. The kind of neighborhood where the streetlights that still worked somehow made everything look worse, pools of sick yellow light that only showed you how much darkness surrounded them. He was moving at maybe 20 miles an hour. No destination, just the engine and the rain and the hollow feeling in his chest when his headlights swept across the mouth of a narrow alley behind a shuttered diner. He almost didn't look. It was the movement that caught him. Something small, low to the ground, hunched over. Cole slowed without thinking about it. He stopped the bike. He sat there for a second, rain hammering his shoulders, engine idling. He told himself it was probably a dog. Probably a raccoon. Probably nothing. He looked again. It was a child. A small girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, crouched beside a dumpster, both hands pressed into something she'd pulled from a garbage bag. She was eating it. She was eating garbage. Her hair was plastered to her face. She wasn't wearing a coat. She had on a small purple sweater that might have been pink once, before the rain had its way with it, in jeans that were soaked black to the knee, and shoes he could see even from here that had a hole in the left toe. Cole sat on that bike for exactly 3 seconds. Then he killed the engine, threw the kickstand, and crossed the alley in 7 steps. "Hey," he said. His voice came out rough. He hadn't meant it to be rough, but that's what happened when a man's heart starts moving faster than his mouth. Hey, kid, hold on. The girl spun around, scrambled backward, pressed herself against the wall of the diner like she was trying to push herself through the brick. Cole stopped, held both hands up, palms out, stood completely still. I'm not gonna hurt you, he said, low, steady, the way you talk to a cornered animal, not because she was an animal, but because she was terrified, and terror doesn't respond to volume or speed. I promise, I'm not gonna hurt you. My name is Cole. I'm just gonna stand right here, okay? I'm not moving. The girl stared at him. Her chest was heaving. Her teeth were chattering so hard he could hear it over the rain. Her eyes, big, pale, rimmed red from crying, were locked on his face with an expression that broke something in him he hadn't known was still breakable. She was trying to figure out if he was another kind of danger. She was calculating survival. At 8 years old, she was standing in a filthy alley in the freezing rain, deciding whether the man in front of her was going to hurt her. Cole had seen a lot of ugly things in his life. He'd done some of them himself, but this was a different category. This was the kind of ugly that doesn't come from violence or crime or poverty alone. This was the kind that comes from abandonment, from a child who has learned that the world is not safe and that she is on her own in it. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. Take your time. Just look at me. Okay, I'm right here. The girl's eyes were moving over him, the leather vest, the patches, the tattoos climbing up his neck. He watched her processing all of it, and he held himself completely still and didn't look away because looking away would be worse. It would feel like hiding something. Then she said something so small he almost missed it under the rain. Uncle Cole, the world stopped. Not metaphorically, not poetically. The world actually stopped. The rain, the wind, the sound of the distant highway, all of it went dead silent in Cole Hunter's head because those two words rewrote every single thing about this moment. He took one step forward, then another. He went down to one knee in the dirty water on that alley floor, and he looked at her face, really looked at her, and somewhere under the grime and the rain and the terror beneath the hollow cheeks and the red-rimmed eyes, he found what he was looking for. He found Sarah's nose, Sarah's jawline, Sarah's way of holding her chin slightly down when she was scared. Emma, he said, and his voice broke clean in half on her name. Emma, baby. She crossed the distance between them in 1 second and hit him so hard he rocked back on his knee, both arms around his neck. Her whole body shaking not just from the cold, but from something that had been wound up inside her for God knows how long and was only now being allowed to release. Cole wrapped both arms around her and held on. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just held her. He pulled her off the ground and stood up and tucked her inside his leather vest, the one he had worn for 11 years, the one that smelled like oil and road and 100 campfire nights. And she pressed her face into his chest and made a sound he would hear for the rest of his life. Not crying exactly. More like something unclenching. Something that had been clenched so tight for so long that the release of it was almost physical, almost violent in its relief. I got you, he said into her wet hair. I got you. You're okay. I got you. He carried her to the bike. He stripped off his outer flannel, the heavy one he wore under the vest in cold weather, and wrapped it around her twice. He didn't ask questions yet. He didn't push. He just got her warm, got her as dry as he could, and kept one arm around her while he thought about what to do next. He needed to get her inside. He needed food, warmth, light. He needed to figure out how long she'd been out here, whether she was hurt, whether she needed a hospital. He was about to pull out his phone when Emma grabbed his arm, not his sleeve, not his hand. She grabbed his arm with both of hers and held on, and the way she did it, the urgency in those small fingers made him go still again. Emma, don't call anybody yet, she whispered. Please, they said if she calls the police. Who said that, baby? She was shaking again. But this time it wasn't just the cold. She loosened her grip on his arm with one hand, and with the other, slowly, like she was dreading the moment she showed him, she turned her own small hand over, palm down, and held it out. Cole looked. On the back of her hand, crude and dark against her pale skin, pressed there by something hot and deliberate, the kind of thing that didn't happen by accident, the kind of thing that required a decision, and the willingness to hurt a child, was a stamp. Purple ink, ugly letters, $30,000, pay or die. Cole Hunter had been in rooms where men had guns pointed at him. He'd been in fights where he genuinely didn't know if he was going to walk away. He'd lost people he loved to violence, into time, and to choices that couldn't be unmade. He thought he understood, by this point in his life, the full range of what human beings were capable of doing to each other. He had never in 41 years on this earth felt rage like what moved through him in that moment. It didn't come hot. That was the thing. He'd always expected rage to feel hot, like fire, like explosion, like something that roars when it arrives. But this was cold. It was cold. It started in the center of his chest and spread outward like ice forming on a lake. Slow, deliberate, total. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He looked at his niece's hand for exactly 5 seconds. Then he looked at her face. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me everything." Emma took a breath. It shuddered going in and steadied coming out, and Cole recognized that steadying recognized the way a person collects themselves when they've been falling apart alone for too long, and they finally find something solid to hold on to. "They took Mommy," she said, 3 weeks ago. Men came to the apartment. I was in my room, but I heard them. They were yelling at her about money. They said she owed them a lot of money. She was crying. She kept saying she'd pay it back. She kept saying, give her more time, but they didn't. They didn't listen. Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together and held herself together through pure will. "They took her. They left me alone. And then 2 days later, somebody knocked on the door, and when I opened it, there was a man, and he grabbed my hand, and he..." She stopped, looked at the stamp. "He said to find somebody to tell. He said, tell whoever loved my mom that if she doesn't pay, they'll bury her." Every word landed like a separate blow. Cole counted them, cataloged them, filed each one in the part of his brain that was already building a response, and already thinking about who, already thinking about where, and already thinking about how. "How long were you in the apartment alone?" he said. "A week, I think. I ate everything in the cabinets. She looked away. "Then I went outside." "How long outside?" A pause. 11 days. 11 days. An 8-year-old girl had survived 11 days alone on the streets of Detroit in late November because no one had come for her. Because every adult system that existed to protect her had somehow missed her entirely. Because the people who took her mother had calculated correctly that an abandoned child would be a more powerful message than a written note. Cole looked at her for a long moment. "You did good," he said. "You stayed alive. You did exactly right." Something moved across her face, disbelief first, then something fragile and desperate that might have been gratitude. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "You survived," he said. "That's enough. That's everything." He stood up, bringing her with him, settling her against his side. "Now I'm going to take care of the rest." She looked up at him. "Are you going to call the police?" Cole thought about the cop who'd looked at his jacket and decided the story didn't matter. He thought about 3 weeks of silence from every official channel his sister might have reached. He thought about an 8-year-old girl with a debt collector's message burned into her skin. "No," he said. He picked up his phone, not to call the police, not to call an ambulance, not to call any of the systems that were supposed to handle this, but had clearly already failed. He called the only number that had never once in 11 years let him down. It rang twice. "Cole." Big Danny's voice, low, unhurried, carrying the particular weight of a man who has seen enough things that very little surprises him anymore. "It's 2 in the morning, brother. What's wrong?" Cole looked at Emma. He looked at the stamp on her hand. "Get everyone up," he said. "I'm coming in. And Danny," he paused, making sure his voice would carry what he needed it to carry. "I need you to tell them that whatever they had planned for tonight is canceled. Whatever they had planned for tomorrow. Whatever they thought they were doing this week." Another pause. "We have something else." Silence on the line. 2 full seconds of it. Then how bad? Cole looked at Emma again. She was watching his face, reading him the way a child reads an adult, when the adult is the only protection she has with everything she had, looking for the truth. He didn't look away from her when he answered. "Someone put a price tag on a child," he said. "My sister's little girl, 8 years old." The silence on the other end changed. It became a different kind of silence. Not the silence of a man processing information, but the silence of a man whose temperature has just dropped 10 degrees. "I'll have everyone up by the time you get here," Big Danny said. The ride to the clubhouse took 14 minutes. Emma sat in front of Cole on the bike, wrapped in his flannel, tucked under his left arm with her back against his chest, her small hands gripping the tank. She didn't say anything during the ride. He didn't either. The rain was still coming down, but neither of them noticed it much anymore. When they pulled into the lot outside the clubhouse, there were lights on. Cole could hear voices through the walls, low, then louder, overlapping. The sound of men being woken up and told something that required their immediate full attention. He helped Emma off the bike. She stood beside him, looking up at the building, at the iron fence, the rusted sign, the row of motorcycles lined up outside, even at this hour. "Are these your friends?" she asked. "Brothers," he said. She thought about that. "Do they scare people?" He almost smiled. Almost. "Yeah, baby, they do." She nodded slowly, with the solemnity of an 8-year-old who has learned things about the world that 8-year-olds shouldn't know. "Good," she said quietly. "I want them to scare the men who took my mom." Cole put his hand gently on the top of her head. "Just for a second." "Count on it," he said. He pushed the door open. The room was already full. 37 men, some still pulling on jackets, some with sleep still in their eyes, all of them turning toward the door when Cole walked in and then going completely still when they saw what was next to him. When they saw the small, hollow-cheeked, rain-soaked girl standing at his side, holding the edge of his vest with 2 fingers like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The silence that fell over that room was not the silence of shock. It was something more serious than shock. It was the silence of men recalibrating, adjusting everything they had been about to say to account for the fact that there was a child here, that whatever this was, it involved a child. Big Danny crossed the room first. 6'4", 260 pounds of beard that had gone gray 3 years ago, and a set of hands that had broken things Cole preferred not to think about. And he crossed that room and went down to one knee in front of Emma like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Hey there," he said. His voice, which Cole had heard slice through arguments in silence rooms full of dangerous men, was the gentlest thing imaginable. "My name's Danny. You hungry?" Emma stared at him, looked at his size, his beard, the patches on his vest, processed all of it. Then she nodded once, very small. "Come on," Danny said and held out one hand. "We got food in the back, real food. You can eat while the guys talk. Okay, nobody's gonna bother you." She looked up at Cole. He gave her a single nod. She took Danny's hand and walked with him toward the back of the clubhouse, and Cole watched her go, watched her small shoulders finally drop about an inch from where they'd been locked up around her ears for God knows how long, and he stood there until they disappeared through the door. Then he turned to the room. 36 men looking at him. Looking. He didn't need to frame it. He didn't need to build up to it or soften it or choose his words carefully. These were not men who needed things softened. He told them exactly what he knew. He told them about Sarah, about the 3 weeks of silence, about the apartment left empty, about 11 days on the street, about the stamp on his niece's hand. He said the number out loud, the $30,000, and he let the sound of it sit in the room, let them feel the weight of what it meant that someone had looked at an 8-year-old girl and decided she was the right vehicle for that message. Nobody moved while he talked. When he finished, the room stayed quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then a voice from the back, Ricky Torres, 29 years old, the youngest full member, they had said in a tone that was remarkably conversational, given the circumstances. "Who do we need to call?" And just like that, the room started moving. Cole had been part of this club for 11 years. He'd been there for disputes and funerals and celebrations and crises. He'd seen them mobilize for things that mattered and things that really didn't, and things that were somewhere complicated in between. He knew what this organization looked like when it decided something required a full response, but he had never seen it happen this fast. Phones came out, names were spoken, a map of the city got unrolled on the pool table and weighted down at the corners with beer bottles and a socket wrench. Somebody produced a whiteboard from a back room that Cole hadn't even known existed and started writing on it in thick black marker, names, locations, question marks that would need to become answers by morning. Cole stood in the center of all of it and let it happen around him and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 weeks. Something so unfamiliar he almost didn't recognize it. He wasn't alone in this anymore. In the back room, through the slightly open door, he could hear Big Danny's rumbling voice talking to Emma, and Emma's lighter voice responding, and the sound of a microwave running, and then the specific silence of a child who is finally, after 11 days, eating something real. Cole looked at his own hand, thought about the stamp on Emma's, thought about the men who had decided that a debt was more important than a child's safety, that leverage was more valuable than mercy, that an 8-year-old girl was a useful tool. He thought about his sister, somewhere in this city, in whatever situation she was in, having been separated from her daughter for 3 weeks and not knowing if Emma was alive or dead or somewhere in between. He thought about all of that. And then he walked to the whiteboard, took the marker from the man holding it, and in the center of the board, in large capital letters, he wrote a single question: who is Victor Kaine? The room shifted. People looked at each other. Information started moving. Because somewhere in this city, Victor Kaine was sleeping, or conducting business, or counting money, or doing whatever men who run debt traps and human trafficking operations do at 2:30 in the morning. Whatever he was doing, he had no idea, not even the smallest suspicion that across town in a room full of men he had drastically, catastrophically underestimated. His name had just been written on a whiteboard, and a clock had started running. He had made 2 mistakes tonight. He had taken the wrong woman, and he had marked the wrong child. Cole Hunter uncapped the marker again. Beneath Kaine's name, he wrote 2 more words, underlined them, set the marker down, find him, and 36 men went to work. The marker was still in Cole's hand when Ricky Torres said the name first. Victor Kaine. Ricky didn't say it like a question. He said it like a man who has just tasted something bad and is deciding whether to spit or swallow. I've heard that name 2, maybe 3 times in the last year, never in a good context. Cole turned from the whiteboard. Talk. Ricky pulled out a chair, sat down, leaned forward with his elbows on the pool table. There was a guy, Darnell runs a shop over on Livernois. He came to me maybe 8 months ago. Said somebody had offered him a loan. Said the terms seemed fine at first, monthly payments, reasonable interest, standard stuff. Then 3 months in, the terms changed. The interest doubled. When he pushed back, men showed up at his shop. Not to talk. Ricky paused. Darnell closed the shop 6 months ago. I assumed he just couldn't make it work. Or he couldn't make it safe, said a voice from the other side of the table. That was Priest's real name. Aaron Whitfield called Priest because he was the quietest man in any room and the most dangerous, which everyone agreed was a combination that deserved its own title. He was standing against the wall with his arms crossed, and he'd been so still, Cole had almost forgotten he was there. I know Kaine's name too, not from loans, from property. The room tightened. My cousin owns a warehouse on the east side, Priest continued. Kaine's people approached him last spring. Offered to buy. My cousin said no. Month later, the city cited him for 17 code violations. Things that weren't violations 6 months earlier. 2 months after that, his insurance dropped him. He sold in October. Priest looked at Cole directly. To a company called Meridian Holdings. I looked it up when it happened. Meridian Holdings is a shell inside a shell. But if you follow it far enough, it leads to Kaine, Cole said. It leads to Kaine. The room was doing the thing Cole had seen it do in crises before it was pooling. Intelligence pulling together information that had existed in fragments across a dozen different lives and experiences. And suddenly those fragments were arranging themselves into a picture. That was the thing about a network like this one. Every man in this room had a different city, a different set of contacts, a different window into how Detroit's underground operated. Individually, each of them had a piece. Together, they had a map. Cole set the marker down. What else do we know about him? 3 people spoke at once, and for the next 40 minutes, the whiteboard filled up. Victor Kaine, 53 years old, originally from the east side of Detroit, but had spent his 20s building operations in Cleveland and Pittsburgh before coming back. Not connected to the traditional organized crime families, he was independent, which made him harder to track, but also made him the kind of man who had no one's protection but his own. His operation ran on 3 pillars: debt, property, and people. The debt traps were the entry point. He targeted small business owners, working class families, people who needed money fast and couldn't get it through legitimate channels. The terms started reasonable and became impossible, and when people couldn't pay, Kaine had 2 options: take their property or take something else. The something else was the part that made the temperature in the room drop another 5 degrees. He moves people, said a man named Cross, heavyset quiet, had been in the club longer than almost anyone. Not in volume, not like a full trafficking operation, more like opportunistic. When someone owes him and can't pay and doesn't have property worth taking, he finds other uses. Cross said it flat without drama, which somehow made it worse. There's been talk about it for a couple of years. Nobody wanted to believe it because nobody wanted to go looking for confirmation. Cole stared at the board, at Kaine's name circled in black marker. And Sarah owes him money. Your sister had that coffee shop on Woodward, Big Danny said. He'd come back in from the room where Emma was eating, and he was standing in the doorway with his arms folded. His voice was careful. I remember you mentioning she was struggling last year, hard year for small businesses. She took a loan, Cole said slowly. The pieces were assembling themselves in front of him in real time, and each one that clicked into place felt like a separate punishment. She must have taken a loan. She never told me because she knew what I'd say. She knew I'd want to get involved, and He stopped, pressed his jaw together, breathed through it. She was trying to handle it herself. The room gave him a second. Not a long one. There wasn't time for long pauses tonight, but a real one. The kind of second that acknowledges something without making it the center of attention. Then Cross said, "We need to know where he holds people." And the room snapped back into motion. Cole's phone rang at 3:47 in the morning. Unknown number. He almost let it go, but something made him pick up. "Is this Cole Hunter?" The voice was male, older, careful in a way that suggested the careful was intentional. Cole walked to the corner of the room away from the noise. "Who's asking?" "My name is not important. What's important is that I know you're looking for Victor Kaine, and I know why." A pause. "I also know where he keeps the people who can't pay." Cole's hand tightened on the phone. He kept his voice absolutely level. "How do you know what I'm looking for?" "Because news moves fast in this city when 200 bikers start making phone calls at 3 in the morning. Mr. Hunter, I've been watching Kaine's operation for 14 months. I am not with law enforcement. I am not a friend of Kaine's. I am someone who has personal reasons for wanting his operation to end, and I have information that could help you." Another pause, shorter this time. "But I need to know that you are actually going to finish this, not scare him off, not rough up his people and give him time to relocate. Finish it." Cole looked across the room at the whiteboard, at the names and locations and question marks that had accumulated over the last hour, at 36 men who were still working, still calling, still pulling threads. "Tell me where she is," Cole said. "I need a guarantee first." "You don't get a guarantee from me," Cole said. "Not harsh, just factual. What you get is my word. And if you know anything about me or my people, you know what that's worth." A longer pause this time. Cole counted it. 4 seconds. 5. "Kaine runs his personal operations out of 2 locations," the voice said. "Day-to-day business collections administration, that's the scrap yard on Connor Avenue. The other location is the docks. South end past the grain elevator, there's a warehouse that's been off the books for 6 years. That's where he puts people he's not done using yet." The voice paused, and when it came back, something had shifted in it. Something had come through the careful professionalism that sounded almost like exhaustion. "Your sister has been there for 18 days. Cole closed his eyes. 18 days. In a warehouse by the docks. For a $30,000 debt on a failing coffee shop. "She's alive," the voice said quickly. "As of 48 hours ago, she was alive. He keeps them alive because a dead person can't tell other people what happens when you don't pay Kaine. The point is the fear." A pause. "But he's been spooked by something in the last week. There's activity at the dock location that suggests he might be preparing to move." "Move where?" "Out of the state. He does this when he feels the heat, takes what he can carry and disappears for 6 months, 18 months, however long it takes for things to quiet down. And when he comes back," the voice didn't finish the sentence. It didn't need to. Cole opened his eyes. "How long do we have?" "I don't know. Days, maybe less." The voice was clipped, now urgent. "There's a shipment moving through the scrapyard on Connor tomorrow night. That's the legitimate cover for his operation. The scrapyard processes and moves metal. It gives him a reason to have trucks and men moving at odd hours. Whatever he's planning, that shipment is connected to it. If you're going to move, it has to be before that shipment leaves." Cole was already crossing the room, already reaching for the marker. "One more question," he said. "Why are you doing this? What's your personal reason?" A breath on the other end. "He took someone from me too," the voice said. 2 years ago, I wasn't as fast as you." A pause. Good luck, Mr. Hunter. The line went dead. Cole stood at the whiteboard. He uncapped the marker and wrote two things: Connor Avenue Scrapyard and South Dock Warehouse. He circled both. He drew a line between them. Big Danny appeared at his shoulder. Who was that? Someone who wants the same thing we want, Cole said, for different reasons. He looked at the board. We need more people. Danny looked at him. How many more? Cole thought about the scrapyard, the dock warehouse, Kaine's security, whatever that looked like. The possibility that Kaine was already in the process of moving, already spooked, already making plans to disappear. He thought about his sister in that warehouse for 18 days. He thought about Emma asleep, hopefully asleep in the back room with a burn mark on her hand and 11 days of survival behind her. All of them, Cole said. Danny pulled out his phone without another word and walked away. What happened in the next 3 hours was something Cole would spend years trying to fully describe and always fall short of. The calls went out not just to the local chapter, not just to the region, but across the network that had been built over decades of shared roads and shared risks and shared understanding that some things matter more than bylaws and boundaries. The calls went to men in Flint, in Lansing, in Toledo, in Cleveland, and Cincinnati. They went to men who had been asleep, to men who were working night shifts, to men who had retired from active club life, but had not retired from who they were. The calls went out and the calls came back, and every call that came back said some version of the same thing. We're on our way. Cole was standing outside the clubhouse at 5:30 in the morning when the first of them arrived, 4 bikes from Flint Engines, running hot men he hadn't seen in 2 years, stepping off and shaking hands and not asking for a full briefing because the briefing they'd gotten on the phone was enough. Someone had put a price tag on a child. That was sufficient. The details could wait. By 6:15, there were 30 bikes in the lot. By 7 o'clock, 48. By 8 in the morning, the street outside the clubhouse sounded like a different city. Cole stood in the middle of it and tried to count and gave up somewhere around 120. They were still coming. He could hear more engines on the streets around the block, more voices, more boots on pavement. Men who had driven through the night from 3 states because the call had gone out, and the reason behind it was the kind of reason that didn't require debate. Ricky Torres appeared next to him with 2 cups of coffee and handed one over. Cole took it without looking away from the street. You know what this reminds me of, Ricky said. Don't, Cole said. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Drink your coffee. A pause, then Ricky said more quietly, how's the little girl? Cole had checked on Emma twice in the last few hours. The first time she'd been eating, actually eating focused on it, in the way that a starving person focuses on food, not savoring it, but processing it with the efficiency of a body that has been running on empty and is trying to catch up. She'd looked up at him and he'd said she was okay, and she'd nodded and looked back down at her food. The second time she'd been asleep. Curled in a corner of the back room on a pile of jackets that someone had arranged into something resembling a bed, Danny's own vest spread over her like a blanket. She'd looked smaller asleep than she did awake, which shouldn't have been possible, but was. She's asleep, Cole said. Ricky nodded. They stood in silence for a moment, both watching the street fill up. We're going to get her mom back, Ricky said. He said it the way young men say things they absolutely believe, without the weight of all the times believing absolutely had turned out to be wrong. Cole looked at him. At 29 years old, in the absolute certainty on his face. Yeah, Cole said, we are. He said it the way older men say things, with the full knowledge of what could go wrong and the decision to say it anyway. Inside the clubhouse, the planning had sharpened into something precise. The anonymous caller's information had been cross-referenced with everything else they'd assembled, and the picture it created was clear enough to act on. Kaine's scrapyard on Connor had a crew of approximately 15 men on any given night, more during active operations. The dock warehouse was smaller, less fortified. Kaine's logic being that the less attention it attracted, the better, which meant fewer visible guards and more reliance on obscurity. The 2 locations were 12 minutes apart by road. The plan that emerged was clean, 2 forces. The first, the larger group, 60-70 men, would hit the scrapyard. Loud, visible, impossible to ignore. Not an assault designed to destroy the place, but one designed to demand total attention and to pull every resource Kaine had toward Connor Avenue and away from the docks. A decoy with teeth, the kind of decoy that would feel very real to anyone experiencing it. The second group, smaller, faster, led by Cole, would move on the warehouse, while the scrapyard was burning hot with the distraction. Get in, get Sarah out, secure whatever evidence existed, and be gone before Kaine could redirect his attention. The timing would have to be exact, the communication would have to be constant, and the first group would have to commit fully. There could be no hesitation, no half measure, because a half measure at the scrapyard would give Kaine's people a reason to look elsewhere, and if they looked elsewhere, they'd look toward the docks. Cole walked through it with the men running the decoy force. Walked through it again. Asked every question he could think of about what could go wrong and listened to the answers and adjusted. He was not a military man, and he wasn't running this like a military operation. There was too much that couldn't be controlled, too many variables, too much genuine uncertainty. But he was running it like a man who understood that preparation is the only currency you have when everything else is chaos. At 9:47 in the morning, Emma came out of the back room. The clubhouse was fuller now than it had been, and Emma walked into it the way a child walks into a room full of adults who are all focused on something important, carefully reading the room, trying not to take up too much space. She found Cole near the pool table and came to stand beside him without saying anything. Just stood there. He put his hand on her shoulder, felt the slight stiffness in her. She was still calibrating, still figuring out whether this place was safe, the way a child who has learned the hard way that safe places can stop being safe will always be recalibrating. You sleep okay? He asked. Yeah. A pause. The big man left his jacket on me. Danny's like that. She looked around the room, at the men bent over maps and phones and coffee cups, at the size of it, not just the number of people, but the quality of the attention in the room. Every person focused on the same thing. Are they going to find my mom? She asked. Cole crouched down next to her, level with her face. He looked at her directly because she deserved that. She deserved the truth delivered straight the way she'd been handling everything else that had come at her. Yes, he said. Her eyes searched his. How do you know? He thought about 100 men in the parking lot, about 2 states' worth of phone calls made before sunrise, about a whiteboard full of information and a plan that had been refined for 3 hours by people who were very good at this specific kind of thing. Because of how many people care about bringing her home, he said. Emma looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked past him at the room at the men, and Cole watched her see, it watched her understand for maybe the first time the actual scale of what was being organized around her. Around her mother, around a $30,000 debt that some man in a suit had decided justified 18 days in a warehouse. Something changed in her face. Not relief, she wasn't old enough to have learned the vocabulary of relief, yet not the way adults experience it. It was something more immediate than that, something more present. She nodded, once, decisively. Okay, she said, as if Cole had simply needed her confirmation to proceed. He almost smiled. She was so much like her mother, it physically hurt. He stood back up and looked at the room and felt the plan taking shape around him, felt the hours collapsing, felt the moment approaching when everything that had been built in this room over the last 6 hours would have to prove itself in the real world against a real adversary who would not make things easy. Cole thought about Kaine somewhere in this city, going about his morning, probably not worried, probably not scared, probably sitting across a desk from someone and talking about money and leverage and the useful property of fear when applied correctly to people who have something to lose. Not scared, not yet. But Cole Hunter had 200 men answering his call, a plan with teeth, and a very specific kind of cold in his chest that had not warmed a single degree since he'd seen a stamp on his niece's hand. He picked up his phone and sent one message to the road captain running the advance team. 3 words. Clock is running. The responses came back in under 60 seconds. 37 confirmations. All present, all ready. Cole put his phone in his pocket and looked at Priest, who was already looking at him. Tonight, Cole said. Priest unfolded his arms, straightened up from the wall. Tonight, he agreed. And somewhere on the south side of Detroit, in a warehouse that didn't officially exist, Sarah Hunter had no idea that by this time tomorrow, everything was going to change. She didn't know about the whiteboard or the phone calls or the 140 men who had driven through the night because her daughter had been found eating garbage in an alley and her brother had made a phone call at 2 in the morning. She didn't know any of it. But she'd been in that warehouse for 18 days, and she'd been telling herself every single one of those days the same thing, the same stubborn, desperate, refusing to quit, thing that Cole had been telling himself for 3 weeks and that Emma had been telling herself for 11 days on the street. He's coming. Cole is coming. She just hadn't known how many people were coming with him. The plan went into motion at 9:15 that night. Not because 9:15 was the perfect time. Not because some tactical calculation had landed on that number as optimal. 9:15 happened because at 9:14, Priest's phone rang, and the man on the other end, one of 3 people they'd placed near the scrapyard to watch movement through the day, said 4 words that ended the waiting. Trucks are loading now. Cole was on his feet before the sentence finished. How many? 2 semis, backlot. They've got 8 men moving cargo. It's happening tonight, Cole, not tomorrow. Tonight. The whole room heard it. Nobody needed to be told what it meant. Kaine was moving faster than the anonymous caller had predicted, which meant their window wasn't days. It wasn't even hours in any comfortable sense. It was right now, and right now had arrived whether they were fully ready or not. Cole looked at Big Danny. Danny was already pulling on his jacket. Cole looked at the room, at the men who'd been waiting, who'd been sitting on this coiled energy for hours, who'd been ready since before the sun came up, and had simply been waiting for the moment to point all of it somewhere specific. Mount up, Cole said. The sound that followed was not loud in the way that crowds are loud. It was purposeful. It was the sound of 193 men moving at once toward a single objective: chairs, scraping zippers, pulling boots on concrete. The low exchange of final confirmations between men who had gone over the plan enough times that they no longer needed to talk through it, only execute it. It was the sound of a decision becoming action, and it had a weight to it that Cole felt in his chest like a second heartbeat. He stopped at the back room before he went outside. Emma was awake. Of course she was awake. She'd been awake, he suspected, for the last hour, lying on her pile of jackets with her eyes open, listening to the building change around her, feeling the shift in energy, the way children feel things that adults have learned to tune out. She was sitting up when he came in, cross-legged, Danny's vest still across her lap. Is it time? She asked. It's time. She absorbed that, her hands pressed flat against her knees. Is my mom going to be okay? Cole crouched in front of her. He'd asked himself 100 times in the last 12 hours whether he should soften this, whether he should give her reassurances that were technically promises he couldn't fully keep. He'd decided the answer was no. Emma had survived 11 days alone on the street by dealing with reality as it actually was not as she wished it to be. She didn't need comfort built on sand. I'm going to do everything I can, he said. Everything. And I'm not alone. He paused. There are almost 200 men going out that door tonight. Every single one of them is going because of you and your mom. You understand what that means. Emma looked at him steadily. It means a lot of people think it's wrong what they did. Yeah, Cole said, that's exactly what it means. She reached out and grabbed his hand. Both of hers around one of his, the same grip she'd had in the alley, fierce, certain, the grip of someone who has decided to hold on no matter what. Come back, she said. He squeezed her hands once. Wild horses, he said. She let go. Cole walked out the back door and the night air hit him, and he heard at the engines. Not starting, not yet, but idling, dozens of them, a low collective rumble that you didn't just hear. You felt in your sternum, in the soles of your feet, in the back of your teeth. He walked through the lot, and the men parted for him, naturally without being asked, a corridor opening up toward the front, where his own bike sat waiting. He swung on, felt the familiar weight settle around him, the machine, the night, the road ahead. Priest pulled up alongside him. On the other side, Danny. Behind them, the column was forming, not chaotic, not random, but organized the way these men organized when something mattered, with the road captain from each chapter, slotting his group into the formation, the whole thing assembling itself with the kind of quiet efficiency that only comes from years of riding together. Cole looked left, looked right, looked once more at the clubhouse door, at the building where Emma was waiting. He looked forward. He pulled out of the lot, and 200 engines followed him into the night. The decoy force split off at Graciot Avenue, 80 men led by a road captain named Boone, who had done 3 tours in the Marines before finding his way to the club, and who approached tactical problems with a specific kind of calm that Cole trusted absolutely. Boone's group peeled left without fanfare, without a word over the radio, just the prearranged signal of 2 quick headlight flashes from Cole that Boone returned before the column divided, and 2 separate rivers of headlights flowed toward 2 different parts of the city. Cole's group, 113 men, continued south. The radio crackled at 9:41. Boone's voice flat and controlled. "We're in position on Connor. 30 seconds. Cole keyed his radio. "Copy. We're 4 minutes out. Wait for my signal." "Understood." 30 seconds of silence. Cole counted them without meaning to. He was riding fast, but not reckless, pushing through the empty industrial streets with the column tight behind him, thinking about the dock, warehouse, about the layout the anonymous caller had described, about the 2 men reportedly stationed at the exterior and the unknown number inside. He was thinking about Sarah. 18 days. He kept coming back to that number. 18 days in a warehouse by the docks, and he hadn't found her, and he hadn't known, and she'd been sitting in there telling herself he was coming while he was filing useless police reports and riding empty streets looking for a trail that had been deliberately hidden. He pushed the guilt down. Not away guilt that genuine doesn't go away, and trying to make it go away is a waste of energy you can't afford. He pushed it down below the operational level into the storage space where he kept the things that would need to be dealt with later and kept his eyes on the road and his mind on the next 4 minutes. His radio crackled again. But it wasn't Boone. It was a voice he didn't recognize. And what it said stopped his heart cold for exactly 2 seconds. "Hunter, this is Marcus Webb. I'm the one who called you last night." A pause. "I'm at the dock warehouse right now, and there's something you need to know before you get here." Cole keyed his radio without slowing down. "Webb, talk. Kaine is here. He's not at the scrapyard. He came to the warehouse 2 hours ago, and he hasn't left. He's here personally, and he has your sister with him, and he has a gun." Another pause shorter. "He knows something is coming. I don't know how, but he knows. He's not moving cargo anymore. He's using her as an exit strategy. He's going to try to walk out of there with her as a shield." The cold in Cole's chest became something that had no name in any language he spoke. "How many men does he have inside?" "6 that I can count, plus Kaine." "You're inside?" "I've been inside for 3 weeks. I told you I have personal reasons." A pause that carried the weight of something complicated and painful. "My daughter was here 6 months ago. She didn't make it out. I've been working my way into Kaine's organization since then to get close enough to do what needed to be done. But I can't do it alone, and I can't do it without getting your sister killed in the process. I need you here. I need you here in the next 10 minutes. Cole processed this in the time it took him to cover 2 city blocks. A man who'd lost his daughter to Kaine's operation. A man who'd spent 3 weeks building access to the inside of that warehouse, working for the enemy, carrying that grief and that purpose simultaneously for 3 weeks. A man who'd called him at 3 in the morning, not out of altruism, but out of the very specific, very personal calculation that Cole's arrival with 200 men was the only force large enough to neutralize Kaine before Webb's cover disintegrated. It was either the most complicated truth Cole had ever been handed or the most elaborate trap. He had 90 seconds to decide which. "Priest," he said, not on the radio, but over his shoulder to the man riding directly behind him. Priest pulled up alongside. Cole looked at him, said nothing, just looked. Priest understood. He'd been in this club long enough to understand the full vocabulary of a look. He pulled out his own phone and made a call, and Cole watched him talk, watched his expression as he listened to the response, watched him hang up. "2 of our guys on the south perimeter say there's 1 man who's been inside that warehouse for at least 40 minutes that they can account for who doesn't fit Kaine's usual crew profile," Priest said. "Older, keeps to the edges, hasn't interacted with the guards." He paused. "He's real." Cole keyed his radio. "Webb, we're 2 minutes out. When we arrive, you do exactly what I say. You don't improvise. You don't make decisions independently. You understand understood. And Webb, if this goes sideways because of something you didn't tell me, I won't forgive it." A breath on the line. "I know," Webb said. "I wouldn't either." Cole clicked off the radio, looked ahead at the road. 2 minutes, 113 men behind him. He keyed Boone's channel. "Boone, go, now." Half a mile across the city, at the Connor Avenue scrapyard, 80 motorcycles announced themselves to the night with a roar that people reported hearing from 6 blocks away. The sound of it reached Cole even from this distance, a wave of engine noise rolling across the industrial south side like thunder that had decided to stay low to the ground. Kaine's men at the scrapyard had no warning. 1 moment quiet, The next 80 headlights and 80 engines and 80 men who were not afraid and were not bluffing. The radio lit up immediately with panicked communication from Kaine's network. Cole's men monitoring Kaine's frequencies heard it all and relayed it in real time. Shouting, confusion, calls being made to Kaine's personal line. And Kaine, inside the warehouse 12 minutes away, was suddenly dealing with two things at once. Cole heard his window open. "Move," he said into the radio, and the column accelerated toward the docks. They came in fast, and they came in from three directions simultaneously. Cole and the primary group from the North Road, a second contingent of 40 bikes from the east along the waterfront access road, and a third group of 30 coming in on foot from the south, having parked 2 blocks away and moved quietly because sometimes silence is more effective than noise. And Cole had learned that distinction from hard experience. The two exterior guards took one look at what was converging on them and made the only rational decision available to men in their position, which was to step back and put their hands where everyone could see them. Cole was off his bike before it fully stopped. Priest was beside him. 3 more men flanked them, not the biggest or the loudest, but the fastest and the most precise. The ones Cole had specifically asked for because what happened inside that building in the next few minutes required precision, not spectacle. The door was unlocked. Later, Cole would learn that Webb had unlocked it from inside 30 seconds before they arrived. That was the kind of thing a man does when he's been waiting 3 weeks for a moment that might be his only chance. Cole pushed through the door. The inside of the warehouse hit him with sound, first raised voices, movement, the specific quality of noise that a confined space makes when the people inside it have just realized that the situation has fundamentally changed. Kaine's 6 men were already responding to what was coming through their radios about the scrapyard, already dealing with the spike of confusion that comes when your boss calls in a panic and your exterior guards stop answering already, in the psychological state that falls somewhere between high alert and controlled chaos. Cole saw Sarah before he saw anything else. She was against the far wall. She was standing, which released something in Cole's chest that had been clenched for 3 weeks. Standing with a man behind her who had one arm across her shoulders and a gun in his other hand, and an expression on his face that Cole recognized even from across the room, the expression of a man who still believes he has leverage, who is still calculating, who has not yet accepted that the math has fundamentally changed. Victor Kaine was shorter than Cole had expected. That was always the thing about men who wielded enormous power over others in the flesh. Without the machinery of that power surrounding them, they were just men. 53 years old, gray at the temples, dressed like someone who spent his days in an office, not a warehouse, which meant tonight had not gone according to his plan either. His eyes went to Cole and stayed there. Cole walked toward him, steady, not fast, not slow, the walk of a man who has made a decision and does not need to perform certainty because he actually has it. "Stop," Kaine said. The gun came up, not at Cole, but sideways pressed against Sarah's temple. "I will do it. Stop walking." Cole stopped, looked at his sister. Sarah's eyes were on him. She had a bruise along her left jaw that was 3 or 4 days old, yellow-green at the edges. She was thinner than he'd ever seen her. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes unchanged for days. She looked like someone who had been through something that would take a long time to come back from. But her eyes were Sarah's eyes, clear, present, already doing the calculation the way she'd always done calculations, the way their mother had done calculations, the way the Hunter family had survived everything that had tried to break them by assessing the situation in real time and refusing to give up on it. She looked at Cole. Cole looked at her. In that look was a conversation that took no time at all, because siblings who have known each other for 40 years don't need words for the things that matter most. She gave him the smallest nod. 2 millimeters. Nobody else in the room caught it. Cole caught it. "Victor," Cole said. He said the name the way you say the name of someone you know extremely well with a familiarity that carries its own kind of threat. "Look behind me." Kaine's eyes moved fractionally to the door, to the men filling it, to the men visible through the windows on either side, the headlights, the engine still running, the sheer number of people who had decided tonight that he was the problem that needed solving. Something moved across Kaine's face. The calculation there shifted. Cole could see it happening, could see the man running numbers and coming up short over and over, no matter how he arranged them. "You're not going to shoot her," Cole said calmly, "because she's the only card you have left, and the second you play it, you have nothing. No leverage, no exit, Nothing between you and every man outside that door. He took one step forward, and you know what happens then. Stay back. I'm going to keep walking, Victor. Another step. And you're going to make a decision, the right one, not because you're a good person, I don't think you are, but because you're smart enough to understand that there is no version of tonight where you hurt her and walk away from this building. 10 feet between them. Kaine's gun hand was shaking, slightly, not enough that anyone untrained would notice, but Cole noticed. The shake of a man whose certainty is leaving him faster than he can replace it. I have people, Kaine said. People who will. Your scrapyard is surrounded by 80 bikers right now, Cole said. Your trucks aren't going anywhere. Your men are standing in a parking lot with their hands up because they're smarter than you're being. 7 feet. You have nobody coming. You have nothing coming. It's just you and me and a very bad decision you made 3 weeks ago. 6 feet. Kaine's eyes were moving. Door Cole, Sarah, door Cole. The gun against Sarah's head was still there, but the arm holding her had shifted, gone fractionally less certain, because the body knows what the mind is slow to accept. The girl, Kaine said, trying a different angle, desperation showing through now, like weather through a crack in a wall. The kid, I don't know where she is, but if you let me walk, Emma is safe, Cole said. His voice dropped to something quieter, more personal, the thing underneath the operational calm. She's been safe since last night, no thanks to you. Something in Kaine's face changed when he heard that. The calculation behind his eyes went through several transformations in rapid sequence. Surprise, then the realization of what it meant that Cole had Emma, then the full understanding of what had been set in motion by the moment Cole had found her. The gun came down 2 inches. It was 2 inches. It was enough. Cole moved. Not dramatically, not with the kind of flourish that stories sometimes assign to moments like this. He moved the way a man moves when he's made peace with what needs to happen and has stopped thinking about it and started doing it fast, economical, with the precision of someone who has been in enough dangerous situations to know that the difference between effective and ineffective is usually the 2 seconds you waste on hesitation. He closed the distance, got his hand on the gun hand, redirected it upward as it discharged. The shot went into the ceiling, plaster coming down like snow, the sound of it enormous in the enclosed space. His other hand caught Kaine at the collar, and the momentum carried them both into the wall, and Kaine hit it hard, and the gun came free and skittered across the floor. Kaine tried to recover. Cole didn't give him the space to. 30 seconds. It was 30 seconds start to finish. Violent and unambiguous, and then it was over. And Kaine was on the ground, and Cole was standing, and Sarah crossed the distance between them so fast she was there before Cole had fully straightened up, and she hit him with her whole body, the way Emma had hit him in the alley all at once, no reservation. Nothing held back. He wrapped both arms around her and held on. She was shaking, or he was shaking. It was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Emma, she said into his shoulder. It wasn't a question, but it was. She's okay, he said. She's at the clubhouse. She's warm and she's fed and she's been waiting for you. A sound came out of Sarah that Cole had no word for. Something that had been compressed for 18 days and was expanding, now filling all the space that fear had occupied, raw and enormous and alive. She found me, Cole said quietly. She held on. She held on until I got to her. He pulled back just enough to look at his sister's face. She's so much like you, it's terrifying. Sarah laughed. It broke in the middle and came out ragged, but it was a laugh real and present, and Sarah and Cole heard it like the first note of something that had been silent too long. Behind him, Priest had Kaine secured. The 6 interior guards had been handled by the men who'd come in through the secondary entrances, efficiently without excess, the way professionals handle things, when the situation has already been decided and the only remaining question is the cleanup. Marcus Webb was standing near the east wall. Cole turned and looked at him, older than he'd sounded on the phone, with the particular hollowness around the eyes of someone who has been carrying grief as fuel for a long time and is only now allowing themselves to feel the weight of what it's actually cost them. He met Cole's look steadily. Cole crossed to him, extended his hand. Webb looked at it for a moment, then shook it. Your daughter, Cole said. Webb nodded once. His jaw was tight. I'm sorry, Cole said. Webb looked away, looked at Kaine on the ground. Something moved across his face that was complicated and real, and not entirely resolved the way genuine grief is never entirely resolved, only managed. Is it enough? Cole asked him quietly. What happened tonight, is it enough? Webb was quiet for a long moment. It's a start, he said finally. Cole's radio crackled. Boone's voice from the scrapyard. Connor is secure. Kaine's trucks are impounded. We've got 3 men in custody and a lot of paperwork that somebody is going to find very interesting. A pause. Also, one of Kaine's guys is asking to make a deal. He says he has information about 11 other people Kaine is holding across 2 states. 11 other people. 11 other families. Cole looked at Sarah. She'd heard it too. Her eyes had gone wide, then fierce the way her eyes went when something mattered, and she'd decided what side of it she was on. Tell him he can talk to the FBI, Cole said into the radio. We'll make sure they're listening. He'd thought going into tonight that this ended with Kaine, that Kaine was the finish line. But finish lines have a way of revealing themselves as starting lines for something else, something larger, something that was always there but needed a door to be kicked open before it could be seen clearly. 11 other people, 2 states, the paperwork in those impounded trucks. Cole looked around the warehouse, at his men at Webb at Kaine on the ground, at his sister standing 3 feet away with 18 days of survival written into every line of her face. He thought about Emma at the clubhouse awake waiting. He picked up his phone. He did not call the police. He called a journalist, a specific journalist, one whose name Webb had given him on the phone the night before, a woman who had been trying to find the thread of Kaine's operation for 2 years and had been running into walls the whole time because those walls had names and badges and the ability to make problems disappear. She picked up on the second ring. I have Victor Kaine, Cole said. I have his records, his operation, and one of his men who wants to make a deal. And I have a corrupt cop whose name is connected to all of it. He paused. You want the story, a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Where are you? She said. Cole looked at Sarah, at the warehouse around him, at what this night had become. South Docks, he said. Come fast, I won't be here long. The journalist's name was Dana Cross, and she arrived at the South Docks in 19 minutes, which told Cole everything he needed to know about how long she'd been waiting for exactly this kind of call. She was 40-something, sharp-eyed, with the particular energy of someone who runs on purpose, rather than adrenaline-controlled focused already recording before she'd fully stepped through the door. She took one look at the warehouse, at Kaine zip-tied on the ground, at the men positioned around the perimeter, at Sarah standing against the wall with Cole's jacket over her shoulders, and she didn't ask any of the questions a civilian would ask. She asked the right one. How much do you have? Enough to end him, Cole said, and enough to end the man who's been making his problems disappear for 3 years. Dana's eyes sharpened. The cop. Lieutenant Gerald Marsh, 13th Precinct. Cole watched her face. You know the name. I've been circling that name for 8 months, she said. There was something controlled and fierce in her voice, the voice of a woman who has been this close before and had the story evaporate on her. Every time I got close to Kaine's operations, something happened. A source went quiet. A document disappeared. A witness suddenly couldn't remember what they'd seen. She paused. Marsh. Marsh, Cole confirmed. Kaine's man on the inside told us before we even got here tonight. Marsh has been running interference for 2 years. Kaine pays him quarterly. The arrangement is documented. Kaine kept records the way careful criminals always keep records because records are leverage, and leverage is the only currency Kaine actually trusts. Cole pulled out his phone, brought up the photos he'd taken of the files Webb had accessed from Kaine's office in the back of the warehouse before they'd moved on the main floor. Take everything. Dana took the phone, looked at the first image, then the second. Her expression didn't change. She had the face discipline of someone who has trained herself not to react until she's processed everything. But Cole saw something shift behind her eyes, something that might have been the professional equivalent of a person who has just found what they spent years looking for. She looked up. This is real. It's real. I'm going to need to verify everything independently before we publish. I need to be clear about that. I can't just... I know how journalism works, Cole said. I'm not asking you to publish tonight. I'm asking you to have it. So that when the lawyers come, when the pressure comes, when someone tries to make this go away, you already have it. It already exists somewhere that can't be reached. Dana looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once and went back to the phone. Cole turned back to the room. Kaine had been quiet since they'd secured him. That was something Cole had noticed about powerful men. When their power was removed, they went quiet in a way that ordinary men didn't. Ordinary men in this situation would be talking, negotiating, threatening, begging. Kaine was doing none of those things. He was sitting on the ground with his hands behind him, and he was thinking, still calculating, still looking for an angle. Cole pulled up a chair and sat down in front of him, close, eye level. Kaine looked at him. "You want to say something?" Cole said. "Go ahead." Kaine held the look for a moment. Then, "You're making a mistake." "I make a lot of mistakes," Cole said. "Walk me through which one you mean." "This doesn't end with me," Kaine said. His voice was steady, impressively steady for a man in his position, which told Cole that Kaine had rehearsed for the possibility of capture the way organized criminals always rehearse for it, had a story prepared, and had angles worked out in advance. "My operation is connected to people who won't appreciate the disruption. People who have considerably more resources than I do." "Are you trying to threaten me or warn me?" Cole said. "Because I can't tell, and it matters for how I respond." Kaine studied him. "Both." "Okay." Cole leaned back in the chair. "Here's the thing, Victor. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not the FBI. I'm not a journalist, and I'm not a judge." He let that sit for a second. "I'm a man whose 8-year-old niece was eating garbage out of a dumpster in the freezing rain because you took her mother and left the kid alone. That's the totality of my interest in this situation." Something moved in Kaine's face. Not guilt. Cole didn't believe for a moment that guilt was in Kaine's emotional vocabulary. Something more like the calculation of a man reassessing what kind of opponent he's dealing with. "The money," Kaine said. "Your sister's debt. I can..." "Don't," Cole said. "Quiet, final." Kaine stopped. "Don't talk to me about the money," Cole said. "Don't talk to me about what you can offer or arrange or make. Go away. We are not in a negotiation. You do not have anything I want." He stood up. "What happens to you is no longer my decision. That's for other people to sort out. What I decided, what I'm here for, is already done." He walked away from Kaine before the man could respond, because the conversation was finished, and extending it would only give it importance it didn't deserve. Priest was waiting near the door. "Federal contact is on his way," he said quietly. Kaine's defecting associate, a man named Torres, no relation to Ricky, who had apparently been looking for an exit from Kaine's organization for 6 months and had decided tonight was the night, had provided a name. An FBI field agent who had been building a RICO case against Kaine's network for 14 months and had been hitting the same walls Dana Gross had been hitting for the same reason. Agent Raymond Park. His number had gone into Cole's phone 40 minutes ago. "How long?" Cole said. 25 minutes. Cole looked at his watch, looked at Sarah, who was talking quietly with Webb in the corner, a conversation Cole couldn't hear but could read in the body language. Two people who had been inside Kaine's world from different angles, comparing what they knew, the way survivors always end up comparing notes when they find each other. He walked to her. She looked up when he approached, and then Webb stepped back to give them space with the natural discretion of a man who understands that some conversations belong only to the people having them. "How are you doing?" Cole asked. Sarah looked at him with the expression she'd had since she was a child when he asked questions with obvious answers. "I'm standing in a warehouse at 11 o'clock at night after 18 days of..." She stopped, pressed her lips together, tried again. "I'm going to be okay," she said. "Later. Not right now, but later." "That's enough," Cole said. She grabbed his arm. "Cole, the other people. Torres said there are 11 others across 2 states. Are we..." "Agent Park is coming. He'll have the information by midnight. The operation to find them starts tonight." He looked at her directly. "We're not walking away from that." Her grip on his arm loosened and she exhaled. "Okay," she said. "Okay, boy, hey. A pause. "Where's Emma right now?" "Clubhouse. Danny's with her." Sarah closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. He watched her do it, watched her let the relief exist for those 3 seconds, in its full size, not compressed, not managed, just present. Then she opened her eyes and she was Sarah again. Clear-headed, forward-moving, already past the relief and into what came next. "I need to see her," she said. "I know, soon." "Cole, 20 minutes," when he said. "I need 20 more minutes here, then I'll drive you there myself." She looked at him, nodded, then, 200 bikers, huh?" The corner of Cole's mouth moved. "Give or take." I always told you those guys were good people, she said. You told me they were terrifying. I said terrifying, not bad. She almost smiled. Almost. There's a difference. The 20 minutes stretched to 40 the way these things always do. Agent Park arrived with 2 colleagues and a document request that took time to process on site, and the Torres debrief took longer than expected. Because Torres had a lot to say and had clearly been waiting to say it, and Dana Cross was still working through Kaine's files on Cole's phone with the focused efficiency of someone who has been handed the biggest story of her career and is not going to miss a single detail. Cole stood in the middle of all of it and waited, and when the waiting got difficult, when the 40 minutes started to feel like 40 hours, he thought about Emma at the clubhouse, cross-legged on a pile of jackets, asking him to come back. He thought about the look Sarah had given him across the warehouse when Kaine had her that 2mm nod. He thought about 193 engines answering a call at 2 in the morning. There was a moment around midnight when Agent Park pulled him aside. Park was maybe 35 lean, with the pressed-together quality of a man who keeps his own counsel and trusts it completely. He'd shaken Cole's hand when he arrived without any of the performance of a federal agent meeting an outlaw biker, just a straightforward handshake, and a look that said he'd already decided how he felt about what Cole had done tonight, and that feeling was not negative. I need to ask you something, Park said. They were standing near the warehouse's east wall, out of earshot of everyone else. Ask, Cole said. Tonight. This. Park gestured a small gesture that encompassed the whole situation. Did you take the law into your own hands? Cole looked at him steadily. I found my sister. I found the man who took her. I held him until law enforcement arrived. A pause. Everything else is a matter of interpretation. Park was quiet for a moment. The stamp, he said, on your niece's hand. Cole said nothing. I'm going to need to document it as evidence, Park said. It's part of the chain that connects Kaine to the debt operation and the trafficking. Which means, he stopped, chose his next words carefully, which means it becomes part of the public record of this case. Cole understood what Park was actually saying. The stamp on Emma's hand was evidence. Using it as evidence meant exposing what had been done to her, putting it into a legal record, making it part of a proceeding that would eventually become public. It meant Emma's worst night being documented in a file that would outlast all of them. I'll talk to Sarah, Cole said. It's her decision, and Emma's. Park nodded. There's something else. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Held it out. We've been building this RICO case for 14 months. There are names in that file that are going to surprise you. One of them is going to surprise you more than the others. Cole took the paper, unfolded it, read it. He read it twice. The name on the paper was Lieutenant Gerald Marsh, which was not the surprise they already knew about Marsh. But below Marsh's name, connected by a documented financial relationship that Park's team had traced through 3 shell companies, was another name. A name Cole recognized because it was the name of the man who had sat across from him 14 days ago and taken his missing persons report about Sarah and written something in a notepad with the expression of a man who had already decided the story didn't matter. Detective Alan Briggs, the cop who had looked at Cole's jacket and decided his sister's disappearance was not worth pursuing. Briggs hadn't been indifferent. He'd been informed. He'd known exactly what had happened to Sarah because he was connected to the system that had made it happen, and he had sat across from Cole and performed incompetence as a deliberate act of concealment. Cole stood with the paper in his hand for a long moment. He was aware of his own breathing, aware of the steadiness of his own hands, which surprised him. He'd expected rage, the same cold rage that had arrived in the alley when he'd seen Emma's stamp, but what came instead was something different. Something that felt almost like clarity. How solid is this? Cole said. Solid enough, Park said. It'll be solid enough to arrest within 48 hours once the paperwork from tonight's operation processes. He paused. I wanted you to know before it became public. Given everything. Cole refolded the paper, handed it back. Arrest him, he said. That's all I want. Park took the paper. There's going to be press, a lot of it. The connection between Kaine's Operation Marsh Briggs, the trafficking, this is a significant case. Your name is going to come up. Cole said nothing. Your organization's name, Park continued carefully. The method of tonight's operation. 200 motorcycles descending on 2 locations simultaneously, that's not going to go unnoticed. It wasn't meant to, Cole said. There are people in my department who are going to ask questions about vigilantism, About the legality of, I understand, Cole said. And when those questions come, the answer is that concerned citizens responded to an emergency involving a missing woman and a child who was in danger, and they held the perpetrator for law enforcement. He met Park's eyes. That's what happened tonight. Everything else is interpretation. Park held his gaze for a long moment. Then something that wasn't quite a smile crossed his face. Not approval, exactly, more like the recognition of a man who has just heard something said with precision. Get your sister home, Park said. Cole found Sarah and said 2 words, let's go. She didn't ask any questions. She fell in beside him and they walked out of the warehouse together, and the men outside who saw them come out. Ones who'd been holding the perimeter for 2 hours parted for them without a word, and Cole heard something move through the assembled group as they passed a low sound that wasn't quite acknowledgement and wasn't quite celebration, but was somewhere between the two. The ride to the clubhouse took 14 minutes. Sarah rode behind Cole with both arms around him, the way she'd ridden behind him when they were teenagers, before either of them knew what the world was actually capable of, back when a motorcycle was just a motorcycle, and speed was just speed, and the night ahead was just the night ahead without anything specific to fear in it. She didn't say anything during the ride. He didn't either. They pulled into the clubhouse lot at 12:51 in the morning. The lot was still crowded, not as crowded as it had been, men having dispersed to homes and chapters across the state and beyond, but still carrying the residue of what tonight had been. Bikes everywhere, groups of 2 and 3 talking, debriefing the particular low-energy aftermath of people who have been running on high alert for hours and are only now beginning to come down. Big Danny was standing outside the door when they pulled up. He looked at Sarah, looked at Cole, looked back at Sarah with an expression that Cole had never seen on Danny's face in 11 years. Something unguarded, something that belonged to a much softer man than Danny generally permitted himself to be. She's inside, Danny said. She hasn't slept. I couldn't convince her. Sarah was off the bike before Cole had the kickstand down. Danny held the door. Cole followed at a distance, because what happened next was not his, it belonged to the two of them, and the gift he could give them was space. He heard it before he saw it. Heard the sound of running feet on the concrete floor. Small feet moving fast, and then Emma's voice. Not words, just a sound. The sound that comes out of a child who has been holding something enormous for 3 weeks and has finally been given permission to let it go. Cole stopped in the doorway. Sarah was on her knees in the middle of the clubhouse floor. Both arms around Emma, Emma's face buried in her mother's neck. Both of them holding on with everything they had. The room around them still populated with 30 or 40 men, big men, men who had collectively seen and done things that would make most people's hair go white, was completely silent. Every person in it had stopped what they were doing and was simply witnessing this moment with the respect it deserved. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Cole stood in the doorway and watched his sister hold her daughter and felt something happen in his chest that he didn't have a word for. Not relief, not joy, though. Both of those were present, something larger, something that encompassed all of it, the 3 weeks in the alley and the stamp and the phone call and the 200 engines in the warehouse and everything in between, and compressed it into this single point of meaning. A child running across a room into her mother's arms. Everything else was just the road that led here. He didn't know how long it lasted, long enough that when Sarah finally pulled back to look at Emma's face, to really look at her, touching her cheeks, her hair cataloging her with a mother's hands, the way a person counts things, they nearly lost. Several of the men in the room had found reasons to look at the ceiling or their shoes or the middle distance. Danny appeared next to Cole, pressed a cup of coffee into his hand without a word. Cole took it, held it, didn't drink it. She asked about you, Danny said quietly. Emma, every hour or so. Is Uncle Cole okay? Did you hear from him yet? He paused. She never doubted you were coming back. Cole watched Emma touch her mother's face, watched Sarah catch Emma's hand and press it against her cheek and close her eyes. She's something, Cole said. Takes after her uncle, Danny said. Cole looked at him. Danny was looking at the floor, his massive arms folded, projecting complete indifference to the compliment he'd just paid. Don't get sentimental on me, Cole said. I'm not sentimental, Danny said. I'm factual. He unfolded his arms. Also, you have approximately 47 guys who want to know if there's a debrief tonight or if they can go home. Tell them to go home, Cole said. Tell them. He stopped, Tried to find the words for what he wanted to say and found them insufficient. Tell them I'll figure out how to say it properly later. Tonight, just tell them thank you. Danny nodded, started to move away. Danny. Cole waited until the big man turned. That was you, wasn't it? The jacket you left on her. Danny looked at him for exactly 1 second. I don't know what you're talking about, he said and walked away. Cole almost laughed. Almost. Across the room, Emma had pulled back from Sarah enough to look at her face properly. They were talking quietly, privately, and Cole watched Emma reach up and touch the bruise on Sarah's jaw with 2 fingers, the way a child touches a wound on someone they love, with total gentleness and total sorrow. Sarah caught Emma's hand, shook her head. It's okay, I'm okay, we're okay. Emma looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned her head and found Cole across the room, the way she'd been finding him all night, locating him like a compass, locating north just to confirm he was still there. Cole raised his coffee cup slightly. Emma gave him a look that was somehow simultaneously 8 years old and 40 years old, the look of a child who has grown up fast and is not entirely sure whether to be grateful for it. Then she turned back to her mother. Cole's phone buzzed. He looked at it expecting Park or Boone or any one of a dozen people who had legitimate operational reasons to contact him in the next hour. It was Dana Cross. The text was 4 words: Marsh arrested, 30 minutes ago. Cole stared at it, read it again. He'd expected 48 hours. Park had said 48 hours. But Park apparently had been conservative, or the evidence from tonight had accelerated things in ways that moved faster than anyone had predicted. He texted back Briggs 3 seconds, then tomorrow morning. Both of them. It's done. Cole put the phone in his pocket. He stood in the doorway of the clubhouse and let that land. Let it be real. Marsh and Briggs, the men who had made Kaine invisible, who had actively participated in keeping his sister in that warehouse, who had looked Cole in the face and performed incompetence as a weapon, were in custody or would be by morning. The empire was collapsing the way empires collapse when the foundations are pulled. Not all at once, not dramatically, but systematically, inevitably, each piece taking the next one down, because the whole structure was built on concealment, and once the concealment was gone, there was nothing holding any of it up. Kaine's name would be in every major outlet by tomorrow afternoon. The trafficking operation across 2 states would be investigated. The 11 other people in Kaine's network, wherever they were, would be found because Torres was talking and Park was listening, and the machine that was now moving had momentum that wouldn't stop. Cole thought about the anonymous caller whose real name was Marcus Webb, who had spent 3 weeks inside Kaine's operation running on grief and purpose, in equal measure carrying the weight of his daughter's death and pointing it like a weapon at the man responsible. Webb had left the warehouse tonight with Agent Park's card and the quiet acknowledgement of a man who had done something that couldn't be fully explained and couldn't be fully categorized, but had been without question necessary. Cole thought about Ricky Torres saying we're going to get her mom back with the absolute certainty of 29 years old. Cole had envied that certainty even as he'd recognized it. He thought about a whiteboard with 2 words underlined. Find him. He thought about a phone call at 2 a.m. to Big Danny and 36 men who were up before the sentence was finished. He thought about all of it, all the moving parts, all the choices, all the people who had contributed something to this night that couldn't be quantified or repaid or even fully acknowledged, and he felt the weight of it, not the burden, the weight. The difference being that some things are heavy because they cost you, and some things are heavy because they matter, and this was the second kind. Sarah appeared beside him. Emma was with Danny now, sitting on the bar of all places, eating what appeared to be a piece of pie that someone had produced from somewhere, listening to Danny tell her something that was making her almost smile, the particular almost smile of a child who is exhausted and relieved and not quite ready to let the happiness be all the way real yet. Sarah stood beside Cole and followed his gaze. She okay? Cole asked. She will be, Sarah said. We both will be. A pause. It's going to take time. There's going to be a lot of time spent on things that aren't easy. Therapists probably. And talking and not talking and all the things you have to go through when something like this, she stopped. But we'll be okay. We're hunters. We're hunters, Cole agreed. She looked at him sideways. You know, she told me you found her in an alley. Yeah. She said she knew it was you by the headlight. She said she saw the headlight and she knew it was your motorcycle. Sarah's voice was careful, carrying something she hadn't decided yet whether to say fully. She said she'd been watching the street for 3 days, watching every pair of headlights, waiting. Cole said nothing. She was waiting for you specifically, Sarah said. Not for anyone, for you. Cole kept his eyes on Emma, on his niece eating pie in a bar at 1 in the morning in a motorcycle clubhouse, in the safest place she'd been in 3 weeks, talking to a man the size of a refrigerator who was being against all reasonable expectation, extraordinarily gentle. She's going to be okay, Cole said. It wasn't a question, it was a decision. Sarah reached over and took his hand, held it the way sisters hold hands, not romantically, not dramatically, just the grip of two people who have known each other their entire lives and know, without saying it, that they're glad the other one is still here. They stood like that for a while. The clubhouse hummed around them, quieter now, the energy lower, the night winding down towards something that wasn't quite peace but was closer to it than anything Cole had felt in 3 weeks. Men talking, someone laughing at something across the room, the ordinary sounds of people who have been through something together and are coming out the other side of it. At some point, Emma looked up from her pie and found Cole again. She held up her left hand. The stamped hand. The hand with the message that had started all of this, the ugly purple letters that someone had pressed into a child's skin as a threat, as leverage, as a demonstration of the kind of power that operates by making people afraid. She held it up, and then she turned it, palm side up, and curled her fingers into a small fist and gave Cole a thumbs up, deliberate, solemn, slightly comedic, in the way that 8-year-olds are sometimes accidentally comedic without meaning to be. Cole looked at her. She looked at him. He gave her a thumbs up back, and just like that, in the middle of a motorcycle clubhouse at 1 in the morning, with the worst of it behind them and the long work of recovery still ahead, with Kaine in custody and Marsh in handcuffs and 11 strangers somewhere in 2 states who didn't know yet that their story was about to change, something broke open in Cole Hunter's chest that had been locked for a very long time. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a door finally opening. He squeezed Sarah's hand once. She squeezed back. The morning came the way mornings do after nights that change everything quietly, without announcement, without any particular awareness of what it was interrupting or what it was beginning. Light through windows, the smell of coffee that someone had started before anyone asked for it, the low sounds of a building settling into a new day with no idea that the day before had been the kind that gets remembered. Cole hadn't slept. He'd tried briefly sitting in a chair near the back of the clubhouse with his eyes closed and his arms folded. But sleep hadn't come, and he hadn't pushed it. His body was too busy cataloging everything, every decision made in the last 24 hours, every moment where something could have gone differently, every variable that had landed right by a margin that he was only now, in the quiet aftermath, allowing himself to fully recognize. When you're in it, you don't feel how close the margins are. You feel them later. You feel them in the silence after. Sarah and Emma were asleep in the back room on the same pile of jackets Emma had been using since the night before, curled together in the particular way of people who have needed each other's physical presence badly enough that even sleep doesn't fully separate them. Cole had looked in on them once around 4 in the morning, standing in the doorway just long enough to confirm they were real and present and breathing, and then he'd pulled the door almost closed and gone back to his chair. By 6:30, he gave up on sleep entirely and went to find coffee. Big Danny was already at the coffee maker. This surprised Cole not at all. "You didn't sleep either," Cole said. "I slept fine," Danny said, handing him a cup. "You've got the same look you had after Toledo." "I don't remember Toledo." "Nobody remembers Toledo the way they actually remember Toledo," Cole said. He took the coffee. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the way men stand together when they've been through something that doesn't require commentary. Then Danny said without preamble, "Park called while you were in the chair. Briggs is in custody, 6:15 this morning." Cole absorbed this. He'd known it was coming. Donna's text Park's timeline, but knowing something is coming and having it arrive are different weights. "How'd he take it?" Cole asked. From what Park said, he denied everything for about 40 minutes, and then Torres's testimony hit the table and he stopped denying. Danny paused. "He's cooperating now. Apparently, Kaine had documentation on Briggs that went further back than anyone knew. Further back than Marsh even. Briggs has been connected to this for 4 years. 4 years. Cole thought about that. About how many cases Briggs might have touched in 4 years. How many missing persons reports. How many people who had walked into the 13th precinct looking for help and walked out with nothing because the man across the desk was invested in their problem staying unsolved. He thought about his own report, the notepad, the expression on Briggs's face. 4 years, Cole said. Yeah, Danny said. They let that sit. The morning continued to build around them, men filtering in and out the clubhouse, waking up unevenly, the way it always did. Conversations picking up where they'd been left the night before, except shorter now, more compressed, the adrenaline fully metabolized and replaced by the lower frequency processing that follows it. Cole moved through it, answering questions that needed answers, acknowledging the men who'd come from out of state and were heading home, making sure the right people knew what Park had told him about the 11 others still being located across 2 states. That last thing, the 11 others, was the thread that wouldn't let him rest. Kaine was in custody, Marsh and Briggs were in custody. The immediate crisis was resolved. But resolved and finished were not the same thing, and Cole knew the difference well enough not to confuse them. At 7:40, his phone rang. Park. We found 3 of them, Park said. His voice had the quality of a man who had also not slept, but was running on something that transcended ordinary fatigue. 2 in Cleveland, 1 in Toledo, all alive. We have addresses on 4 more that we're moving on this morning. The other 4, still working on it. Torres is being remarkably cooperative. I think he genuinely wants out and understands that the quality of his information is directly connected to the quality of his outcome. A pause. We'll find them, Cole. All of them. Cole pressed the phone against his ear. When can I tell Sarah about this? A beat of silence. You can tell her now, Park said. She deserves to know that it's bigger than just her. That what happened to her is helping end something that was happening to a lot of people. Another pause. She should know that. Cole thanked him and hung up and stood for a moment with the phone in his hand. Then he walked to the back room and knocked softly. Sarah's voice came immediately. She hadn't been asleep either, or she'd woken up and was pretending otherwise. Come in. He pushed the door open. Emma was asleep, genuinely asleep, the profound unconsciousness of a child who has finally been given permission to let her guard down, completely curled, with her knees drawn up and her face relaxed into an expression that was purely simply 8 years old. No wariness, no calculation, just a kid asleep. Sarah was sitting up, watching her daughter sleep with the expression of a woman who has decided that this specific site, her child's safe present breathing, is not something she is going to take for granted for a very long time. Cole sat down on the floor beside her, kept his voice low, told her what Park had said. All of it, the 3 people found, the 4 addresses, the ongoing search, the scope of what Kaine's operation had actually been, and what its unraveling was going to mean for people they'd never meet. Sarah listened without interrupting. Her hands were in her lap, very still. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. 11 people, she said, that we know of. Could be more as the investigation opens up. She looked at Emma. And none of that would have started if Emma hadn't... She stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence the way it was going. Tried another direction. If you hadn't found her. If she hadn't survived long enough for me to find her, Cole said. 11 days, Sarah. She survived 11 days. Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet, but her voice was steady. She gets that from her father's side, right? Because I would have completely fallen apart. You lasted 18 days, Cole said. She looked at him. I knew you were coming, she said simply, as if that explained it entirely, and perhaps it did. Cole looked at Emma, at the rise and fall of her small chest, at the hand tucked under her cheek, the left hand, the stamped hand, though the stamp had blurred and faded with water and time, and was now only a ghost of itself, the letters barely legible, the purple reduced to a shadow on pale skin. I want to clean it off her, Cole said. Properly. Whatever's left. Sarah nodded. Later, when she wakes up. She'd want to be awake for that. She paused. She told me last night it felt like being owned, Sarah said quietly. She said she didn't understand why someone would do that to a person. Put a number on them. Her voice tightened, then released. I didn't know what to tell her. Tell her it was one man's idea of power, Cole said, and that a lot of people disagreed. Sarah almost smiled. 200 people, give or take. Give or take. The door knocked once very lightly, and then Danny's face appeared in the crack. He looked at Emma, looked at Cole, looked at Sarah. "There's someone outside," he said. "Wants to talk to Cole, says his name is Webb." Cole and Sarah exchanged a look. "I'll be right back," Cole said. Marcus Webb was standing in the parking lot in the early morning light, looking like a man who had just crossed a finish line and was only now discovering that finishing had not resolved the thing that had made him start running. He looked older outside than he had in the warehouse, or maybe the warehouse light had been flattering, or maybe this was simply what grief looked like when it was no longer being actively used as fuel. Cole stood with him. "I wanted to tell you something before I left," Webb said. He was looking at the lot, not at Cole. "When I started this working my way into Kaine's organization building the Access waiting, I told myself it was about justice, that I was going to get justice for my daughter, and that was going to be enough." He paused. "I don't know if I believed it then. I know I don't believe it now." Cole didn't respond. This didn't need a response yet. "She was 22, Webb said. Her name was Carla. She'd taken a job with one of Kaine's front companies. She didn't know what it was, she just needed work. And then she was in too deep and couldn't get out and—" He stopped. A long pause. "They found her in the river in March." Cole felt the weight of that, let himself feel it without deflecting it. "I'm sorry," he said. The same two words he'd said in the warehouse. And they were still insufficient, and he said them anyway because insufficient was better than nothing. Webb nodded. "Your niece," he said. "The little girl. She's going to be okay. She's going to be okay. And your sister. Going to take time, but yes." Webb was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. "Just that good with the weight of a man for whom the goodness of this outcome is real but adjacent to something it can't reach." He finally looked at Cole directly. "I know what happened to Carla doesn't change because Kaine is in custody. I know that. But—" He stopped again. "But it's different than if he'd walked away," Cole said. Webb looked at him. Something shifted in his face, a recognition, a relief at not having to find the exact words himself. "Yeah," he said. "It's different than that." They stood for a moment in the early light. "What do you do now?" Cole asked. Webb thought about it, genuinely thought about it the way a man thinks about a question he hasn't been able to ask himself, because he's been too busy executing a plan to consider what came after it. "I don't know yet," he said. "I'll figure it out." He put out his hand. Cole shook it. Webb walked to his car, didn't look back. Cole watched him go with the specific feeling of watching someone carry something that won't be put down today or tomorrow, or probably for years if ever, but that they've decided to carry forward rather than let it stop them where they stand. He went back inside. At 9:15, Emma woke up. Cole knew the moment she woke because he heard Sarah's voice shift from the quiet murmuring of someone talking to themselves into something responsive, something answering. He gave it 10 minutes and then he went to the doorway. Emma was upright, hair still tangled, still in the clothes from yesterday, still wearing the particular expression of a child recalibrating to consciousness after a genuinely deep sleep. She looked at Cole with the same compass-finding instinct she'd been using since the alley, locating him automatically. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she said. Her voice was raspy. Then with the complete non-sequitur logic of a child, "Is there more pie?" Someone had produced more pie. Cole had no idea where the pie kept coming from and had decided not to investigate it because some things were better as mysteries. Emma ate the pie, sitting on the bar again, with Sarah beside her and Cole on the other side, and the three of them existed in the kind of ordinary quiet that is only possible after something extraordinary. The quiet that comes when you've been through the worst of it and have arrived somewhere that still has pie in it and is therefore against all reasonable probability going to be okay. At some point, Emma put down her fork. She looked at her left hand. She looked at Cole. Cole reached into his jacket and produced a cloth he'd asked one of the guys to find earlier. A little water. Nothing dramatic. He held out his hand, palm up, and waited. Emma put her hand in his. He cleaned it carefully. The remaining ghost of the stamp, the purple shadow that had faded from something deliberate and ugly into something barely there, came off with less effort than he'd expected, almost as if it had already been deciding to go on its own and just needed the help. When he finished, her hand was clean. She turned it over, looked at both sides. Then she looked up at him with an expression that he knew he would never fully explain to anyone who hadn't been in that alley, hadn't seen her eating garbage in the rain, hadn't watched her hold herself together by sheer refusing to quit force of will for 11 days and then hand him her stamped hand like a piece of evidence and say they took my mom. Is it gone? She asked. Not about the stamp exactly, about something larger than the stamp. Cole looked at her clean hand, looked at her face. The bad part, he said, is gone. Emma processed that. She was deciding something. He could see her deciding it the way she decided everything, with total seriousness and no performance. She nodded. Once. The same decisive nod from the alley when he'd told her what was coming. Then she picked her fork back up and went back to the pie. Sarah caught Cole's eye over Emma's head. Her expression held everything the moment contained: grief and relief and love and the long road ahead and the fact that they were on it together in a single look that lasted less than 2 seconds and communicated more than an hour of conversation would have. Cole looked away before either of them had to do anything with it. The day continued. People came and went. Ricky Torres showed up mid-morning, ate 4 donuts, and gave Cole a handshake that turned into a half-hug that he immediately pretended hadn't happened. Priest came by long enough to confirm that the men from out of state had all gotten home safely and that Boone sent his regards from Flint and would be expecting a proper debrief at some point when things settled. Dana Cross sent a text that simply said, "Story runs tomorrow. Front page." Park called twice with updates. 7 of the 11 others found the search continuing, the documentation from Kaine's files, expanding the case in directions nobody had fully anticipated. The world kept moving. The machine that had been set in motion the night before was still running, would keep running, would reach places and people that this morning couldn't yet see. That was what happened when you pulled the right thread, not a clean resolution, but an unraveling, a cascade, things coming apart that had been held together by the kind of pressure that only works when nobody looks directly at it. Someone had looked. A lot of someones, as it turned out. Late afternoon, Cole stepped outside alone. He stood in the parking lot with his hands in his jacket pockets facing his bike. The bike that had been moving when his headlights swept an alley and caught a small girl eating garbage. The bike that had carried him to the clubhouse at 2 in the morning and back to the docks and back again. It looked exactly the same as it always did, oil dark, worn in the right places, scarred in a few ways that each had their own story. He heard the door behind him and knew from the footsteps that it was Emma before she appeared beside him. She stood next to him looking at the bike. "Is that the one?" she asked. "The one what? The one you were riding when you found me?" "Yeah," he said. She looked at it with the solemn consideration she brought to most things. "It looks old," she said. "It is old, it's evil. But it works. Always has." She thought about that. Then, Uncle Cole, are the bad men really gone? Cole looked out at the lot, at the bikes still lined up along the fence, fewer than last night, but still there are a handful of men who'd stayed, who'd decided without being asked that staying was the right thing. At the clubhouse behind him, where inside Sarah was on the phone with a therapist's office, making an appointment for next week, her voice steady and purposeful, the way it got when she was moving towards something instead of away from it. He looked at Emma, straight at her the way she deserved. "The specific bad men who hurt your mom," he said, "are gone. Kaine is locked up. The men who helped him are locked up. Your mom is safe." He paused. "The world still has hard things in it. I'm not going to lie to you about that because you already know it better than most kids your age." Emma looked up at him, waiting. "But here's what's also true," Cole said. "Every time something like this happens, every time someone decides a person can be bought or owned or used, there are other people who decide they're wrong, and sometimes those people show up." He looked at her. "Sometimes 200 of them show up." Emma was quiet for a moment. She was looking at his vest, at the patches, at the things stitched and painted onto the leather that the world looked at and decided meant something specific and frightening. "My teacher says motorcycle clubs are dangerous," she said. "Some are," Cole said honestly. "Are you?" Cole considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I've been dangerous when it was necessary," he said, "and I've been other things when those were necessary too." He looked at her. "Last night it was necessary to be someone who doesn't stop." Emma absorbed this. Then she reached out and grabbed the edge of his vest, the same 2-finger grip from the alley, the grip that had become in less than 48 hours its own private language between them. "I'm glad you don't stop," she said. Cole put his hand gently on the top of her head. "Just for a moment." "Me too, kid," he said. They stood there together in the afternoon light, the man who the world called an outlaw, and the girl who had survived 11 days alone, and neither of them needed to say anything else because everything that mattered had already been said in alleys and warehouses and whiteboard markers and 200 engines and one very small thumbs up across a crowded room. Inside, Sarah was on the phone. Outside, the remaining bikes sat quiet. Somewhere across the city, Victor Kaine was in a holding cell running out of calculations to make. Somewhere across 2 states, people who didn't know their names yet were being found by men with badges who'd been handed the right information at exactly the right moment. And in a parking lot in Detroit, at the end of the worst 3 weeks of 3 people's lives, an 8-year-old girl was holding the edge of a leather vest, and the man wearing it was holding the world still for just a little longer. And for the first time and longer than either of them could measure, neither of them was afraid of what came next. Cole Hunter had spent 11 years riding away from everything that felt too permanent, too close, too much like something he might lose. He'd told himself that was freedom. He believed it mostly the way you believe things that are convenient enough and true enough and serve their purpose well enough that you don't look at them too closely. Standing in that parking lot with Emma's 2 fingers on his vest and Sarah's voice coming through the door, and the long work of recovery spread out ahead of all 3 of them like a road that was hard but real. He looked at it closely, and what he found, looking at it directly for the first time, was not freedom. What he found was something he hadn't known he was missing until the moment he stopped moving long enough to feel its absence. He found that he was home, not a place, not a building, not even the clubhouse behind him, though the men in it were the closest thing to brothers he'd ever have. Home in the way that matters most, the way that has nothing to do with walls or addresses, and everything to do with the people who hold on to you and the people you hold on to back, in the understanding arrived at through the worst kind of experience, that holding on is not weakness. Holding on is everything. Emma looked up at him one more time. The afternoon was getting cooler, and she was probably hungry again. She had been hungry constantly since last night, her body making up for 11 days of absence in a way that would continue for weeks, and there was pie left inside, and her mother's voice was coming through the door, steady and real and present. She let go of his vest. "Come inside," she asked. Cole Hunter looked at his bike one last time, at the road behind him and the road ahead, at all the miles and all the nights and all the choices that had carried him to an alley at 2 a.m. with his headlights sweeping the dark. He turned toward the door. "Yeah," he said, "let's go in." And that was enough. That was exactly, completely, entirely enough.